Robert Short has this report.
N.A.M.A would cost the taxpayer nothing. It could even turn a profit.
It is the best option. We've got to do this in a way which protects the interests of taxpayers.
We've brought changes in that make significant protection, or bring significant protections for the taxpayer.
We're satisfied that N.A.M.A can start off on a profit-making basis. The taxpayer will not be at a loss over time.
Back in October last year, N.A.M.A forecast a profit of €4.8 billion. Now it sees three scenarios. One where property prices recover over the next decade their long-term economic value. An estimated price on average 11% higher than prices in November last year. This would deliver a profit of €1 billion. A more optimistic scenario where property prices recover an additional 10% on top of that to deliver a profit of €3.9 billion. And a third scenario where prices rise by an average of just 1%, which would deliver a loss of €800 million. The problem is, in many sections of the market, prices are still falling, making any climb back to long-term economic value more remote.
I'm very worried by the persistent use of this figure of 11%, which is based off a very small preliminary analysis of the property market. And it also doesn't take into account the fact that property prices are going to have fallen since November 2009.
Nobody can predict the property prices that are going to be there in 10 years' time. But if we think that the Irish property cycle is going to be anything like international average property cycles, it's unlikely that we're going to see any sort of major uplift.
With approximately €40 billion backed by the state at risk here, and just 1 in 4 loans paying back, the potential downside to N.A.M.A's projections is disturbing. The banks have been blamed for dressing up their figures, but now N.A.M.A is inside the banks, there are no more excuses about valuations. And if the recent recalculation of the staggering €22 billion potentially needed to shore up Anglo-Irish is anything to go by, the taxpayer needs to cast a cold eye on N.A.M.A's numbers. Land is projected to make up 37% of N.A.M.A's assets. Much of the second and third wave of loans will be on smaller development projects outside the main cities, where prices have fallen furthest.
You could be talking about the value of land going down by 90-95% or more. And that's going to be reflected in the next tranches that hasn't been reflected in the first tranche.
If there's no improvement on the percentage of loans that are actually being repaid to N.A.M.A, then it seems inevitable that the state agency will foreclose on a large number of developers. That will make N.A.M.A the biggest force in property management in the state. But with no information on the properties it will be taking on, it'll create the problem of a lack of transparency in the market.
If you don't know what you've got, if you don't know how much you've paid for it, if you don't know who owns it, if you don't know who lent the money, and if you don't know what the likely future path of change in terms of those parameters is, why will anybody buy any product? N.A.M.A as it exists right now is a gigantic bung in the property system.
One of the lesser-known assets we as taxpayers will own through N.A.M.A is €14 billion worth of derivatives, or financial products. These are even harder to value than falling land prices.
There's a lot of confusion about whether we're paying nothing for taking these over or whether we're paying something, what the role of the banks is, and how many banks are involved. So it really is difficult to say, of that 14 billion, how much of it is going to come back and haunt us.
The assumptions in N.A.M.A's business plan have multi-billion euro implications. Combine that with an absence of information over exactly what's going into N.A.M.A, and it makes the trust a weary public is being asked to place in this powerful state agency a colossal leap of faith.